Welcome to Sleepless in St. Canard, where nostalgia replaces REM cycles. I'm Kitty.
And I'm Ange.
And we haven't slept
in 30 years.
This is a podcast about the 90s Disney cartoon Darkwing Duck, which sometimes parodies another 90s show that oftentimes was pretty cartoony. Diane, I am holding in my hand a document of digitally written notes about an episode Ange and I will be discussing today. An episode with enough lumber to make the Black Lodge shudder. An episode that really had its head in the soil. So come firewalk with us as we take a ride down the waterfall and wash up dead on the shores of...
Twin Beaks?
Twin Beaks.
I only, partially understood some of those references.
That is because the show that is being parodied very, very heavily in this episode is Twin Peaks, which I have watched the entirety of quite a while ago, and it is a very strange show.
How long is it?
It is so it came out, I actually pulled up a blurb here. So it came out in 1990, and it ran for 2 seasons and was canceled in 91. Then they did a 3rd season in 2017. So,
okay.
25 years later, and that whole season was just like, oh, what's going to happen? Because it really, season 2 left off on a big cliffhanger, and David Lynch was very David Lynch about it and just completely threw everything out the window, basically, and just did whatever the hell he wanted to do. So it was really, really very, very strange, as is David Lynch's way. Not to say that the first 2 seasons also weren't very strange. That being said, this episode is still very strange.
Yeah, I was not really aware of Twin Peaks the first time I watched this, or even the second time, so I was just... I don't know. I remember being very baffled by all of it.
Yeah, and in preparation of this episode, I did watch the pilot episode of Twin Peaks again, and it just kind of was shaking my head. It's just very quirky, very strange. So just basic cliff notes of what the story of Twin Peaks is that a popular high school girl, a senior named Laura Palmer, her body wrapped in a plastic sheet washes up on the bank of the river, which is very obviously referenced in this. And it's like there's the FBI agent that comes to town to investigate, and then all the soap opera drama of the people in the town and finding out that Laura Palmer wasn't as squeaky clean and a good girl as she was. But it's also got a weird supernatural element of it, and there's characters that are in it but just are completely weird. There's one woman, so Binky's sister in this episode is kind of a parody of 2 characters from Twin Peaks. There's the woman Norma who runs the diner, who makes the best pie and the damn good cup of coffee. And then there's a recluse named Nadine with an eye patch and red hair. And she is really kind of off her rocker. And there's a whole part, a huge chunk of the 2nd season, is she gets a head injury and thinks that she's back in high school and is on the cheerleading squad because the whole school goes along with it's really just crazy out there soap opera stuff. So, but it was a phenomenon, and it's really kind of got a cult following. So I'm not surprised that the people who were working on Darkwing Duck were like, you know what we should do? We should do a Twin Peaks episode, because you know what falls right into our laps? Twin Beaks.
So, did Twin Peaks also have space cows and mutant cabbages?
No. You don't really know what's going on in Twin Peaks. It could be aliens. It could be just weird stuff. There's definitely supernatural things, and the FBI agent is warned by an otherworldly being that the owls are not what they seem, which is where launch pads, the cows are not what they seem, come from. And there is a character named the Log Lady who talks to her log. It was a very wise log, and that's, again, Launchpad has a log in this episode that he talks to.
So they kind of simplified it and blended it down to just a few characters and concepts in Twin Beaks.
Yes, and then the theme music and the music of the show is parodied throughout the episode, and the whole like opening of this like they kind of do like a take on the opening credits of Twin Peaks with like the slow intro and the weird music as Pinky's poured a cup of coffee and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's
So,
interesting that this is one of the only times in Darkwing Duck that they did an accurate or close to an actual parody of a pre-existing show. I know Darkwing Duck itself, Tad Stones has said that it's based on Silver Age comics and there's a lot of tropes in there. But this, I feel like, is the only episode that actually, like you're saying, takes the music and all this other stuff and almost the cinematography from the sounds of it, from the opening.
yeah, it's I feel like the most direct parody, in as much as that is, because I feel like there's a lot of, parodies or throwaway comments or just little things, but this is like a whole episode dedicated to Twin Peaks, which is kind of weird considering uh you know Twin Peaks was pretty racy and deals with the murder of a teenage girl.
Who is Bushroot in this version?
Who is butchered in this version. So, before we dive any deeper into these maddening waters, did you have any updates for the peoples?
The only update I have is related to the Dynamite comics. Once again, I know that at this point the date has been pushed, but I keep seeing conflicting dates still. It sounds like January 25th, so I'm just going to say probably the end of January, close to, is when we can expect the first issue. And it's the same with Gargoyles. Gargoyles was also pushed. They had the first issue drop, but not the second. Apparently, according to Dynamite, it was due to the fact that because of the holidays, it slowed down printing and all that stuff, I guess. So we'll get there. The comics are coming, but they're a little out of our grasp for the time being.
Just a little more patience. There we go. So yeah, sometime late January slash possibly February slash we'll have a new comic, and I wonder what properties they'll parody in that. So if you would like to watch Twin Peaks before listening to this episode, it is season 1, episode 44 on Disney Plus. And the synopsis is Darkwing Duck travels to the odd town of Twin Peaks. And should you be interested in watching Twin Peaks, it is available on Paramount Plus. So our episode kicks off with Bushroot in jail. He is not enjoying being in jail, not at all like his friend Quackerjack. And he says that he only robs banks for seed money and basically is just whining to the guard who really could give a shit. He does not care at all and just walks off. And Bushroot laments, "You would have thought that I was the only vegetable that gone bad." So as he's complaining to himself in his jail cell, a light comes through the cell window and it kind of blanks out the screen. And then we go to Darkwing and Launchpad and the Thunderquack, where Launchpad is reading and driving with his feet, and Darkwing is having a much warranted heart attack about it. Launchpad lets him know that did you know that police departments are using psychics in their investigations? And he reveals that his information that he got from the incredibly large and weird books for your coffee table collection. And, Launchpad could read, so I'm impressed. But Darkwing is not impressed and tells Launchpad that good old detective work is the only way to solve crimes, which is how he caught Bushroot. And Launchpad says, "I thought it was because he was hiding in the back of a police car."
Oh, Bushroot.
Which is a beautiful, beautiful setup on any level, because it just shows Darkwing's personality and how stupid, I guess is a strong word, how hapless Bushroot actually is. That he is taking refuge in the back of a police car and winds up getting arrested.
Oh, too good.
So, The warden apparently has called them to the jail to investigate Bushroot going missing, or, Bushroot being Bushroot. Darkwing starts threatening Bushroot, like, immediately upon entering the jail cell, being like, oh, don't move. And then the warden, who's super casual about the fact that Bushroot hasn't moved for 2 weeks. So Bushroot has just been moldering away in his cell for 2 weeks. And Darkwing goes over looking for clues at the hollowed out corpse of Bushroot. It is pretty terrifying. Like, legitimately hollowed out eyes, and like his mouth is open and you just see the blackness inside of his eye sockets, and
You know what he
he's
reminds me of?
withered. What?
Animal Crossing, you know those little things? I forget what they're called. It's like whenever you would gyroids or something, and whenever you turned off your game and you didn't do it properly, at some point didn't your face turn into like the same hollowed out look?
Oh boy. Yeah, I have not played Animal Crossing since the GameCube one, but he is scary. And this is the Bushroot that appears in the DuckTales reboot. So he apparently made a lasting impression on Frank and Cody's too. Oh. So, yeah, so terrifying corpse Bushroot and Darkwing, all of Darkwing's facts lead to the consensus that Bushroot is dead.
Stand back while I collect my clues. Okay, hair wilted, complexion dry and brown, no pulse. Of course, that's normal for a vegetable. Warden, the facts point to one unarguable conclusion. Bushroot, scourge of the plant kingdom, is dead.
Shouldn't we check his aura?
What's he doing? Excuse my sidekick. His brain seems to be having an out-of-body experience.
Nah, that's in Chapter 10. I'm trying to connect with the powers of my subconscious mind.
I think that's a pretty fair conclusion.
It is a very fair conclusion, but Launchpad decides to read Bushroot's aura, because that's a thing that he does now because he read a book. Launchpad trips on a vine that's on the ground and kind of bursts Darkwing's detective method as they find that there's a crack in the wall and the vine grew out the wall, and Bushroot probably escaped that way. And because we see that it snakes down the outside of the prison wall. The warden is just completely taken with super psychic Launchpad, and that's all he needed, because then we get back to the Mallard house, and Goslin and Launchpad are wearing pyramids on their head to amplify their psychic powers.
That's actually a thing.
Is it?
Yes, pyramids are in the psychic community and like spiritual community. They're seen as a powerful thing, and I actually own I think it's I own like a quartz shaped pyramid. It's not like a big one, it's a little tiny one I bought somewhere at like a market or a craft thing, but it is totally like actually quite a few of the supernatural / spiritual / psychic things in this are actually accurate to
I thought you were going to say you have a pyramid hat that you wear sometimes.
I don't have a pyramid hat, but
yet. Now that you know that really amplifies your psychic powers, you might have to get one. But yeah, I've seen those before, like the stones and the shape, and then there's the organite whole pyramid thing where you put all kinds of stuff in it, and it's supposed to block you from the lizard people or something. So yeah, Launchpad, Goslin, pyramids on their heads, and Launchpad tells Darkwing to get the door before the door even rings. And hooray, it's Honker! Honker says that he needs Drake's help because his family has been acting really weird. And as we say this, we get a shot of Launchpad and Goslin standing there with their pyramids hats on. It's kind of like a fisheye lens of like, And Honker says, I hope it's not contagious. Drake tells Honker that weird is a relative term with his family. And as he dunks on the Muddlefoots, as always, Goslin tells Drake to knock it off because Honker is serious and asks him what's up. And the Muddlefoots have disappeared! No. Tragedy! Police! Fire! Call the National Guard! Someone call 911! 911! Oh, those poor Muddlefoots can't catch a break. Drake is like, well, one can only hope.
He says to the child who lost his entire family and who knows if they're alive or not.
One can only hope. So Drake is as sympathetic as always. As they head over to the Muddlefoot house, where it's pretty trashed. There's about a foot of dirt and soil on the ground, and Hunker's only explanation is mom's been gardening. Darkwing starts looking for clues, and Launchpad starts checking for auras, and Launchpad trips over a cabbage as we get our first riff of the Twin Peaks theme song. Apparently, this cabbage was sent by Honker's Aunt Trudy, and that's when Binky got the gardening urge. And apparently, Honker is allergic to cabbages because he's like, just being near it gives me hives. Drake, in his investigation, is like, Herb hasn't been gone long. The TV is still warm.
It's perfect.
It was. And there's a tape still in the VCR, and it's of a lady giving gardening tips. It's called Gardening with Gertie, which I feel like you may have heard that before. I might be thinking of the other lady that had the dirigible school. But yeah, she's got cabbages, and she's talking about how to take care of her cabbages. And in the background, Darkwing sees Bushroot just hanging out.
Looking worried.
Looking worried. And then he spins a narrative about how Bushroot escaped from prison and kidnapped the Muddlefoots, is forcing them to grow mutant cabbages. And Goslin is just like, why would he do that? And then Darkwing, as he's triumphant in his, connecting the dots, he's holding Honker in the air, like by his shirt, and cannot answer the question why. It's like, because he had, with the beak, and he, lets Honker go. Launchpad is like, well, I can find out where they are, and uses a dowsing rod and a map to try to find the Muddlefoots, as Darkwing uses the clues in Goslin's reading allow that the tape was recorded at a town named Twin Beaks at the same exact time that Launchpad's dowsing rod skewers the map at the town of Twin Beaks.
Dun, dun, dun.
And we zoom in on the map, and it's two mountains, but they have beaks on them, so that's pretty cute. And then we get more musical interludes as we basically get the Darkwing Duck version of the Twin Peaks opening. But with more cabbages, honestly. We see a dude with a cabbage in the basket of his bicycle, and a woman with a baby carriage walking down the street with a cabbage and baby clothes in it. And then we head into the diner where Binky is being served coffee by a Binky-looking woman with a eye patch and a red dress. And then we see Herb on a farm hoeing. Hoeing with some cows. And we see the waterfall, as is in the actual Twin Peaks. And then we see two dudes in red hats just chuck the corpse of Bushroot wrapped in plastic down the waterfall.
Okay, but is this the same? Is this the same corpse from the prison or a different corpse?
There are a lot of Bushroot corpses in this episode, and they never get explained.
Is he like a snake? Like he sheds his hollow Bushroot husk of a body and has a fresher version of himself?
I suppose. I can't imagine that it's the same one for the prison. Leaves his shell. He's like a nut. He cracks himself. And
yeah, because it doesn't make sense to me that Darkwing was at the prison. He's never been to Twin Beaks. So the husk was at the prison. Why would it be all the way in Twin Beaks? It has to be. Apparently Bushroot just has shed himself several times.
Yes. And we really don't get any explanation as to where these Bushroot corpses are coming from, or even what transpires that happen. Maybe, I don't know, because there's aliens involved, spoiler, but that seems to be when he turned into a husk the first time was when he got beamed up to the spaceship, allegedly? No? I don't know, Ange. It doesn't make sense.
And especially since I didn't know about Twin Peaks when I first saw this episode, I was like, what the hell is going on?
it still doesn't make sense having watched Twin Peaks. So yeah, they chuck that bush root wrapped in plastic down the waterfall, and the thunderquake zooms into town, and Launchpad is flying and just goes, "Well, it's time to put on the blindfold," as he's flying, and everyone appropriately freaks out. But he says that he doesn't want his subconscious influenced by what he sees. And Darkwing's like those trees, as they crash through the forest. But apparently he makes the smoothest landing of his life. But of course, that's just because he's crashed in the canopy of the trees as Darkwing steps out and plummets to the ground. Womp womp. They then wander through the forest toward the sound of a farm, and they lose him again. As he wanders off, they follow him and find him in a pasture with cows, holding a log to his ear. And he says the cows are not what they seem. And everyone looks on very concerned. And Gosling's like weird, and Hunker weighing in says, "Even for Launchpad." Which, true, little man, true. Launchpad has gotten some very specific directions on how to get to Twin Beaks from the log, and tells them to stop at Trudy's for some pie and a darn good cup of coffee. And Darkwing's like, "Oh, did the cows tell you that?" And Launchpad said, "Oh, don't silly. The log gave me the directions. The cow just warned me not to order the coffee." There's a lot of
this entire scene was so funny. Just the reaction of Darkwing, Goslin, and Honker. They don't say anything for much of this scene. But especially Darkwing, just the look he gives Launchpad several times, it kills me every single time. It's so funny.
He's truly like, this is it. Launchpad has finally lost it. What little of it he had is now gone. Off to greener pastures, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And they arrive at Trudy's Diner, where there are a bunch of cabbages sitting at booths and at stools. And there's even a cabbage bathroom.
Shout out to mutant cabbages. Gotta be one of my favorite genders.
Yeah, and Darkwing is still convinced that Bushroot is behind it. Goslin still wants to know what he could possibly be gaining from any of this. And Launchpad lets them know that the log thinks Bushroot is innocent. And Darkwing is like, "Of course it does. It's a plant."
That's actually, fair logic.
It's very sound. It's very sound. Trudy comes over, and Darkwing is attracted to a woman who looks exactly like Binky. Like, basically slobbering all over himself.
It's the eye patch. He's got a thing.
I guess.
He's got a thing for, I don't know.
Women with eye patches and red. Maybe he just likes ladies in red. But he's super thirsty for her.
He really is.
Yeah, and Goslin just kind of rolls her eyes. Trudy tells Honker that Herb and Binky are out back. They just came to help with the harvest. And Honker runs off, so excited to see his parents. As if he was me, I would run to the Muddlefoots. I feel like they give good hugs. Like, Herb has to have one of those great big bear hugs.
He does.
You know? But be that as it may. Herb and Binky are standing outside the diner, just literally standing out back by the dumpsters. And we are clued in pretty quickly that these are not our delightful Muddlefoots, our angel mother and father. Binky is ominously holding a cabbage. They are very unhinged Muddlefoots, in fact. And Binky shows Honker that there is a Honker inside the cabbage, and then he gets sucked inside. Like, it seems like he gets, or like maybe she shoves the cabbage in his face. We don't really know what happens.
It's best to not know.
It is best to not know. But this is where we leave it. So they have cabbaged Honker, but then we see them later on just finally tying him up in the woods. So they must have carried him away with him, a little cabbage Honker. I don't know. I guess they are still Muddlefoots underneath all the leaves. They don't plan very well. So then we go to a scene of some cows mooing at the moon like wolves, and that's our commercial break. It's just such a strange episode. Back at the diner, everyone is at the counter reading UFO newspapers, and Launchpad says something strange is going on, And in a very specific example, Darkwing says that no, strange would be finding out that your wife is an Elvis impersonator from the Bermuda Triangle. This place is bizarre.
Oddly specific.
Oddly specific. Trudy says that this town just feels particularly close to their plants. And then Darkwing drinks the coffee and says that it tastes like fertilizer. And Launchpad tells him that he should have listened to the cows. At the C word, everyone in the diner runs. Like they scream and run out just in terror. Even Trudy, the babe. Darkwing starts pulling at the thread of why everyone would be afraid of cows.
I can tell. This coffee tastes like fertilizer.
Maybe next time you'll listen to the cows.
Cows? Why would cows scare them? I've got it. Cows make milk. Milk goes bad. The coffee is bad. Bushroot's bad. You see? It all connects.
Oh, but the log says Bushroot is innocent.
You expect me to take the word of an obvious plant sympathizer?
He's really grasping at straws.
Brilliant Darkwing, as usual.
Pretty hysterical. And Goslin and Launchpad are not impressed. Launchpad reminds him that the log keeps saying that Bushroot is innocent. And then Darkwing says, you expect me to take the word of an obvious plant sympathizer, which I feel like they could have just cut that off as an obvious plant. And it would have been a better joke. But no one consulted me. Okay, I wouldn't have known at the time. I was a youngin'. But anyway, that's my hot take now. Goslin is drinking a pink milkshake, which I guess does not taste like fertilizer. And she's just like, well, you should listen to the log. And then Darkwing starts declaring that whole, the whole comedy bit of like, I'm not wasting my time following a log into the woods. You're never going to get me into the woods with that log. And then, of course, they're walking through the woods with the log. And cows moo at them as they pass. There's a lot of cows in this episode. And Darkwing rants the whole time until he trips over the Bushroot corpse wrapped in plastic on the riverbank. And Bushroot is dead again. And for whatever reason, Goslin is like, oh, well, there goes your dumb theory. Sniffy jerks later. I'm going to go find Honker. And just like wanders off.
She did not care. She did not hesitate. She is not moved by any of this. It's actually, It's so funny.
Yeah, it's just like, well, later, losers. And Darkwing's like, aren't you even curious about how Bushroot ended up here wrapped in plastic? And she's like, how else do you keep vegetables fresh?
Wow.
Oh, man. And then Darkwing says, Launchpad, I never thought I'd say this, but I have some questions to ask your log. And as Goslin walks away, we see that the evil cabbage herb Muddlefoot is watching her from behind a bush and is menacingly rubbing his hands together. Oh no, what's he gonna do? She encounters a cabbage-holding Honker in the woods because Honker's cabbage allergy is never mentioned again. But this would have been a good time to be like, wait, you're not the real Honker, you're holding a cabbage. But we don't really get that sign to do that. Because she looks over and the evil Muddlefoots are wrapping up the real Honker like right next to where he's standing. It was just kind of like, oh no. And Goslin starts to pop out of the cabbage that the not Honker is holding and tries to attack her, but she chucks the cabbage, her and Honker, and the cabbage Muddlefoots, rescuing the real Honker, who tells her that they're all alien plant invaders who want to replace everyone on Earth. And Goslin says, that plot doesn't sound so cliche when it's happening to you.
It's true.
It's true. The Muddlefoots chase her through the woods as Cabbage Goslin bounces after them until they get to a cliff. And then we have another flash of light from above and we scoot our story back over to Launchpad and Darkwing. And then so the first part of this is spectacular. Darkwing, complete Darkwing fashion, has now abandoned logic and deduction and is super on board with psychic stuff. And he's just it's never mentioned. It's just purely a visual thing that he's trying to outdo Launchpad by having three pyramids stacked on top of his
So
head.
good. It's so.
It's so funny.
It's
It's
pure Darkwing.
spectacular. So he's like, "Oh well, I'm gonna have a vision and I'm gonna know what's happening." And he blindfolds himself and walks right into a tree, knocks himself out, and then he has a crazy fever dream. And it starts with him flying through space on a star that dumps him into a desert where the sand is disturbed as a giant launch pad with a pyramid on his head erupts out of the ground, talking about how the cows are not what they seem. And then two cows dressed as policemen dance around him and clobber him with their billy clubs. Then Bushroot is like Jacob Marley shows up screaming, "Look what they did to me!" Then we go to a restaurant where Darkwing is served a cabbage by a cow, and the cabbage hops off the plate onto a stage where it starts just like jettisoning smaller cabbages everywhere. And then they're marching in like these giant lines as the log runs alongside them, talking in Bushroot's voice. And then all the cabbages erupt into Binky and Herbs, who start doing a kick line as Launchpad riding a cow jumps over the moon, saying, "You should have listened to us." And then Darkwing is hoisted by a pack of Herb and Binkies and is about to be fed to a cabbage with teeth when the ground beneath it cracks and a Chernobog cow bursts out of the crack and blows light in his face. And then he wakes up.
Oh. What gets me about that is that technically that dream was actually accurate to what was happening, metaphorically. So, does Darkwing have psychic powers?
See, it's the stack of pyramids. It really did it for him. It is such a weird sequence. Like, it felt like it could have been over 3 times, and it just kept going. And I was like, what in the world? And I guess it felt like Twin Peaks. Because it's just a whole bunch of random visuals and things thrown at you. I feel like it's a little more coherent than some of the Twin Peaks dreams, but no one was speaking backwards, so there was that. It was just, I was like, I have to type this all out. I have to tell exactly what happens because it's so friggin' weird. And then, yeah, so Darkwing wakes up in the forest and is completely salty about his vision and grumbling about how stupid this whole acid trip was. And Goslin, who I don't really know, like, she just wanders up to him. Like, we don't really know how she got back to him, what happened with that flash of light. She's just there as he's ranting about the cows aren't what they seem. What does that even mean? And she's like, why not ask her? And points to just this giant cow lady who's standing there in a very ineffective space helmet and is like, "Greetings, Earth Duck." And like her helmet is like one of those like dome helmet things, but she's got a cutout for her snout. So it's like her snout and the tips of her horns are the only things that are sticking out. Like, what what does it do? Glorified goggles.
It's just a fashion statement.
I suppose it is. And I don't know. I feel like sometimes her udders were pink and most of the time they were white. It was a very concerning character for me. I didn't quite enjoy her.
I didn't really focus on her udders very often, so
Yeah. They changed colors. But she's doing her whole thing. And Darkwing is just suddenly doused with water, I guess to prove that he's not sleeping anymore. And Goslin breaks down the whole plot about, oh, there's cabbage aliens and they want to take over and blah, 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 blah. And then the cow says that she comes from planet Larson from the far side of the galaxy.
ha ha ha.
Oh, sensible chuckle, sensible chuckle. And that she's been in contact with the dumber life forms basically on the planet. And Launchpad is so proud to be counted in that category. And she said that she used Launchpad to bring Darkwing here as the plant creature spied on the cabbages. And then we watch as the log turns into bushroot. And now, every single time that the log told Launchpad that bushroot was innocent, is revealed to just be Bushard being like, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. Don't know how he turned into a log. We don't know how he was spying on the cabbages by being a log.
I guess.
We don't know how his corpse wound up in the cabbage's clutches. No one ever deigns to give us any information about how Bushard becomes a log, but they're basically like, wow, guess Bushard is immortal. So basically the cow says that she's counting on all of them to keep all the cabbages occupied until the cows arrive, as this big beefy baby is just a hologram. And so that's what they have to do, and the gang is watching as Binky is loading cabbages onto a bus, and they're spying on her, and then Darkwing cooks up a plan. Inside the diner, Trudy is serving a cabbage and a dude when Darkwing kicks in the door with a blender attachment on his gas gun and threatens them by blasting coleslaw at them, which I guess seems very effective because we go outside. Herb and Binky are now discussing their evil plans when Launchpad, dressed up like a farmer, shows up and tells them about a swarm of flying cabbage beetles that are on the way and that they should get that bus out of there. And Herb knows everything about beetles and says that that's bullshit, that that's not a real thing. But Goslin swoops in bug-like, I guess, and scares them off. She's got like little doodle bobs on her head and stuff. And then she runs inside to check on Honker, who is making something. He's got a recipe book. He's doing all kinds of things. And as he loads it into it's like an injector thing. I get I don't know.
It's like those little pesticide spraying things.
Yeah, like it's like a sprayer, I suppose. Those things are always in cartoons. I have never encountered one in the wild.
Me either.
They must have existed at some point. Cartoons wouldn't lie to us. But yeah, so as he loads the injector with the concoction he's been making, Herb and Binky bust in, and poor Honker is like, I can't shoot my mom. And then Goslin's like, they're not your real parents. And then Herb drops the time to leaf pun, and Honker goes, I guess, into a homicidal rage and is no longer holding back and blasts his parents with what I guess is salad dressing, because he says, oh, it's salad dressing. These cabbage aliens, very easily deterred. Get some coleslaw, get some salad dressing, they run for the hills. You say the cow word, over. Out on the street, cabbages are blooming into people as Bushroot rallies the real produce, and they rally up the corn, tomatoes, and pumpkins, start cleaning house. They take out basically everybody. Oh, no one will call us pansies. And then there's a little pansy standing at his feet, shaking its fist up at him.
It's like Plants vs. Zombies before Plants vs. Zombies.
It is. It is. Bushroot husks and friends versus zombies. No, I don't know. I can't keep track of this episode. There's so many things going on. So everybody meets back in the street, and Darkwing's gloating about how great they are. But then a bunch of Darkwings start popping out of cabbages. But they come out with the gas gun too, which I think is very unfair. And they basically disarm everyone and shoot weed killer at all the plants and kill them. And they get surrounded. But the cavalry arrives just in time. Hey, and zaps all the cabbage people back into cabbages. And that's that.
Hang on. I just thought of a pun too.
Please.
Cavalry.
Hey! Look at us. Look at us, huh?
Continue.
We're to the meat of the puns now. So the real Muddlefoots kind of wake up in the diner as the cow lady explains that the rest of the townspeople will be okay, and that a radiation leak on a farming colony of theirs caused these mutations. And she's like, our food was never meant to be intelligent. And Bushroot is horrified that the cows eat the sentient cabbage. And Darkwing agrees that it's pretty gross. And the cow gets up in his grill and is like, okay, when's the last time you had a steak sandwich? And Darkwing says, I'm actually more of a peanut butter and jelly guy myself. And then the cow says that they were just in time. Even if one of the cabbages escaped, it would have been disastrous. But there was already one in St. Canard in the Muddlefoot living room?
Oh, that's true. Unless I guess they didn't bring it with them, did they?
No. Yeah, I don't no. So the world's already doomed. But of course, as she's explaining this, we pan back over to Bushroot's empty chair, and we see that he has run off with a cabbage and is now promising to show it the world. And they get one more cow moo directly at the screen before the credits roll.
What an episode.
What an episode. What a thing that just happened. It is a rare episode. But you know what, though? I'm going to say it's a rare episode that I don't particularly care for because the Muddlefoots aren't really the Muddlefoots.
I suppose. It's a false Muddlefoot flag.
It is. They don't really get to be too Muddlefooty because they're evil cabbages in Muddlefoot suits. So it's like a weird like invasion of the body snatchers thing. I guess mixed with Troll 2 because they're all plant people shaken up into a salad dressing with Twin Peaks and The Far Side. I don't really know what kind of drink that makes, but I don't think I like it all that much. I don't understand the cow thing.
Yeah, I didn't know. I wasn't sure if that was from Twin Peaks or just something they decided to roll with.
They really rolled with it. They were just like cows. Cows, cabbage, let's do it. And you know what? It wasn't a terrible episode. It was just really very strange.
What's your rating?
Rating would be, I would say 3 out of 5 logs. What about you?
I was gonna say maybe 3.85 logs out of 5. My reasoning being that I did like the dialogue, especially Darkwing. Darkwing was at his Darkwingiest, just in general. You know, the exchanges between him and Launchpad and Goslin in particular, just when Darkwing's rattling off his theories. It's just like, but why? And you just can't answer her. I don't know. It was just so funny because that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, I don't know. It's just hilarious because she calls him on it.
He does.
So,
and he's like forced to look at his ridiculousness and try to connect the dots again, and he can't. Yeah, every single little scenario that he came up with was gold in this.
The animation itself was pretty decent. Everybody was, for the most part, on model. There was nothing that really caught me. Basically, the only reason it's not a higher rating for me is because it is a very strange episode, and when I first watched it, I did not understand what it was a reference to, so it makes it even more confusing, I think, to some extent, because I was like, well, how did they come up with any of this? Like, it's just so weird. And then now that I know that it is, in fact, a lot of it is a parody, it makes more sense.
Yeah. But, you know, for as much as, like, it is a parody, it's also just so out there, too. It's, like, not really, like, I don't know, like, if there were cows in Twin Peaks, it would have made, I don't know. It was just very strange. And I don't understand what the flashes of light were. Because that's what like, the flash of light, because it obviously wasn't the spaceship coming because the cows weren't there yet. The cow lady was just a hologram.
Maybe it was the hologram appearing before them. And then telling them everything. Because she appears before Bushroot. Maybe she tells Bushroot what's going on. He escapes and leaves behind a husk so that they won't know he's missing. And then he gets there, he goes undercover, leaves another husk for some reason, and turns into a log. And then when Goslin is running with Honker and they're trapped, maybe she appears again as a hologram to explain the situation, although I don't think that would help them off the cliff while they're being chased. But
yeah, well, the cabbages are very afraid of cows.
that's
So maybe
true.
they saw the cow and booked it.
Yeah, so that's my theory as to what that was. We did get some Muddlefoot lore. I mean, we now know that Binky Muddlefoot has a twin sister named Trudy, and that Darkwing would hit that.
He would hit it like Launchpad and the canopy of a forest. Yeah. So do you think that Trudy needs the eye patch, or is it purely aesthetic?
I think I assume she needs it.
Yeah, so that was Twin Beaks, and it was a weird one.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of, I just don't care for Bushard all that much. I don't care for him.
He's okay.
Yeah. Alrighty, so that's our wrap up of our wheel. We have conquered the wheel.
I can't believe it.
How do you feel?
I feel like there's a lot more episodes to get through that aren't on the wheel, so I guess we still got to get to those. But the fact that we even made it through what we did put on the wheel is, hats off to us. Give yourself a pat on the back.
Thank you. Pat on the back for you too. Pat on the back for all our listeners. We made it through round 1 of the wheel. We will be repopulating the wheel. We were kind of talking about maybe switching up the categories a little bit because I feel like we've tapped out our choices on a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we will have to confer on that at some point, Ange. But in the meantime, we will be filling our time with, we had put out a request for you guys to write in to see if there was any episodes that you'd like us to cover. We did get a few leads, but if you do want to send us an email.
Are you going to try and remember the email?
I'm trying to look it up. I'm trying to cheat. I can't find it. Ange, what's our email?
It is sleepless.stcanard. That is stcanard@gmail.com. And I always put the email in the episode notes as well.
Yes. So if you have thoughts, requests, or if you just want to dunk on me for not being a huge David Lynch fan, please go ahead. But for right now, we have several suggestions.
At the same time, or just like one
No,
after
no,
the
no, no.
other?
Just like one after the other.
Yeah, we could do one after the other because we haven't gotten any other requests yet.
So we have from Naz, friend of the podcast, requests that we watch The Exterminator. Is that the name of that episode?
Exterminator, yeah.
Exterminator. Because they say it blew my damn mind watching it on Saturday morning as a kid, and I haven't watched it since. And then whichever Tuscanini episode makes an appearance in the opening theme sequence. It says because the animation looks off the hook and also for Kenneth Mars being overdramatic. Which then led me to realize we haven't watched any Tuscanini episodes.
Yeah, we haven't.
So, yeah, I'd be down for that. He's definitely one of the characters that I like, but I always forget that he exists. He's not like a top tier villain, but he's definitely, I feel like, a pretty good middle of the pack villain.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
He's entertaining enough. His shtick is funny, and as Naz says, the performance is very good from his voice actor, who I guess is Kenneth Mars.
Yes.
So, do we want to start with Steerminator?
Sure, I'm down with that.
So, I pose a question to you first then. We haven't watched Darkly Dawns the Duck, so should we do Darkly Dawns the Duck so that we could talk about Taurus Bulba proper before he becomes the Steerminator?
Then we'd have to do a 2-parter.
Okay, we can jump around. What's continuity? I don't know her. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe Steerminator first?
Sounds good. All right, so next week we'll be discussing the magnificent voice acting talents of Tim Curry as he appears in Darkwing Duck for sadly only 2 episodes. I guess 3 if you count Darkly Dawns as 2. And until then, remember that the cows are not what they seem, and that crime doesn't sleep, and neither do the cabbages.
Don't drink the coffee.
My cabbages!